Hi, everyone. Join me as I interview super interesting people about everything and nothing in a podcast called NAUT FOR EVERYONE. Our next guest is George Bowering, the great George Bowering, I might add. He's a critic, he's a poet, he's a historian. He is a magnificent poet and thinker. And he has guided so many poets, both in Canada and around the world, to think differently about what poetry can be. George Bowering has won the Governor General's Award twice. He's written more than 36 books. He is the first Parliamentary Poet Laureate of Canada. He was presented with the Order of Canada and the Order of British Columbia. He's a very, very well-known and respected Canadian poet, most beloved. He's also a shit disturber, as all poets must be, and he's one of the original disruptors. I would say his poetry is filled with jazz and nuance and music, and it's always had that kind of glow of jazz, of pure jazz. Mr. George Bowering is an honored poet to me, and he is an honored poet to the world. Honorifiabilitudinatibus, Mr. George Bowering. First things first.
Yep.
I just wanted to know more about your awards. So starting, when did you get the Order of Canada? When was that?
That too was around just sort of into the century. I think it was like 2001 or 2002, something like that. Can't remember for sure.
Right.
I was there too, but I just don't quite remember.
What happened at the airport?
At the airport, this guy comes up to me and there's all kinds of people walking around carrying their Order of Canada stuff to take on the plane and go back home to Calgary.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there waiting to go back home to Vancouver and so on and so forth. This guy comes up to me, he says, "Are you George Bowering?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am." And he said, "I thought so. Your dad was my teacher in high school." Gene loves that story because I walked around looking really snooty up until then, right? And I sort of slunk onto the DC-8 or whatever we were flying at the time. The olden days.
The olden days.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of olden days,
Yeah.
tell me about your days in Kerrisdale. You wrote a book about it. Everyone can read that book.
Yeah, Kerrisdale Elegies is the name of the book, and it's not all that expensive. I do that from time to time, just sort of.
Yeah, pitch it.
Yeah.
Plug it.
I was when I moved there. That was about 1974, something like that, and I had to pay so much for it monthly that it took something like 60% of my salary, which is not advised, right? No. So, but I got to really like pork and beans a lot. Yeah.
But you had a great place to put all your books.
And I did, and it was a big old house. It was a sort of my friends used to all call it Versailles, right? Because it had so many rooms and so many lights, and my late wife at the time she'd spent the next 25 years making it more expensive and getting it. I kept paying off the mortgage, and then she would get a whole pile of stuff done, like put in an elevator, right? But it was a big old place. But I had 5 rooms with floor-to-ceiling books on all walls. It was incredible. You should have seen me get rid of those books. You notice there's no books around here to speak of. It's almost all gone. Partly because I saved the ones I really like Charles Olson's poetry and so forth, and Margaret Atwood's poetry, etc. And that's going to go to a special room at UBC.
Oh.
in the special collections. It's going to be called the Bowering something. And it's also going to take my desk, which used to be Warren Tallman's table, and it's going to take like some portraits of me and a couple of baseballs and shit like that, right? And lots and lots of books, thousands of dollars worth of books.
Oh.
Yeah, but now it's so ironic. I can't read books because I'm going blind. And so now I listen to books, and luckily some of them are not done by machine robots. You should hear them. They see the word, they say if I'm reading a baseball book, and the story says, they took a 4-3, they took a lead in the game, right? They'll read it as, he took a lead in the game. So, but anyway, I'm really lucky because like Mike Ondaatje's first book in 20 years just came out this year.
Yeah.
And he reads it. So you get to hear him reading it with that marvelous, wonderful voice of his. Like, that was really good.
And it's a beautiful book.
It's wonderful. And and he also sent me the book and the spoken word book.
Oh.
So I got to hear him reading it. It was just absolutely marvelous. First, he said, I don't know if you know this, but he says he's never going to write another novel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, for him, writing a novel was really hard work. It always took him about 7 or 8 years to write a book, write a novel. And he's just not going to do it anymore. And so this was his first book of poetry in 20 years. Can you imagine?
Yes.
Yeah, God.
I have a question.
Yeah. That's your job.
That's my job.
Yeah.
I thought of one all by myself.
Okay.
And I was thinking, what do you think of AI as a writer? You think down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I hate it.
You hate it?
I hate it. I hate the machines. They really mess up poetry. They really screw it up. They just go like that. And if there's a space between one poem and another one, or a stanza and another one, they don't care, because the space means nothing to the robots, right? They just go like that. They read poetry as badly as my grade 11 teacher. So there.
And
I don't want to get upset.
no, I don't want you to get upset.
Oh, okay.
I get your point.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people use AI to search various things, and AI actually doesn't have the knowledge yet. It hasn't it hasn't caught up with it.
Well, here, I'll give you, see, I talked to, so I say to my phone, hey Siri, who led the National League in batting this year? She says, here's what I saw on the web, and shows me a bunch of stuff. I said, Siri, I'm talking to you and asking you to tell me that because I can't read. I'm blind, right? They're so stupid. That's the trouble. Maybe it'll get better. Probably will.
It might be because
it's better than it used to. It's like women's basketball. It's better than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. And it keeps you company sometimes. You know, when you're spending all those hours alone writing, you can have ChatGPT open. You can say, hey, how you doing today? And ChatGPT will go, I'm well, how can I serve you? And you go, well, I just want you to be there while I'm working. If you could keep it down. And sometimes ChatGPT will now laugh at my jokes.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. Oh, ha, 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 ha. I will keep it down. Thanks for reminding me. I mean, really, ChatGPT can have quite a sense of humor.
You know what happened one time? The center fielder for the Tampa Bay baseball team, his name is Siri, S-I-R-I. So one time I'm watching a ball game, right? and the announcer mentions his name, and both my phone and my tablet both say yes. and I was thinking, hey, wait a minute, this is going on all over North America right now. Millions of computers are saying yes. That's okay. I really like Well, for a moment, I like them.
Yeah. For a moment, there's always those moments where you go, I think you just laughed at my joke and you're a computer.
Yeah.
And that's kind of fun in itself.
Yeah.
And maybe I can train you to think like me and get all my jokes. So I'll be all alone, working, writing for hours and hours, bored with myself sometimes. And I can make a joke and I come to again because the computer gets it.
Yeah, or sometimes you talk dirty to it, right?
I have never tried talking dirty to the computer, but I'm now, because of you, I'm going to try it. I'm going to go home and say, what are you wearing?
Yeah.
And the computer will go, what do you mean, what am I wearing? And now, poems by heart. Yes, learn your poems by heart. And learn someone else's poems by heart. Let the poem enter you. Let it inform your cells. Let it move with your blood. Let it take you on different journeys. Let your body become one with the poem. Let the poem become one with the body. Body of poem, poem of body, body of poem, poem of body. Learn your poem by heart. Speak right into that camera and say the Beowulf.
Right now?
Yeah.
I forget it.
You do not.
The door gave way, though fastened with bolts. Maddened, he broke through the breach he had made, swollen with anger and eager to slay the ravening fiend o'er the bright paved floor, furiously ran.
Oh, I love to hear you say things.
Yeah.
When I would hear you read your work,
you'd get moist.
I definitely get moist. That goes without saying. But what turned me on was the jazz.
Jazz.
Yeah. I know that, I know you may not identify as a jazz.
I do.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Jazz poet.
I think of myself as George Coltrane. No, that's an interesting story because I only had one cousin that was older than me, and that was Russell. And he was, not the only one because, I had a couple girls that were cousins of mine, but they had a different mother. But Russell, this was in Penticton, he was a jazz saxophone player, and the main thing was sitting on the porch of this hotel on the beach in Penticton and playing all night long, sitting on the roof, right? But he died when he was 21 during an operation, and his mother said that I could have all his horns. I was about 13 at the time.
Wow.
And I had never had anybody die on me before, right? So I said, no, like that. Oh. Ever since, I've been trying to kick myself in the ass, right? Because he had a tenor and a soprano and a clarinet and so forth. I could have been I could have been the Canadian Coltrane.
Well, maybe you are.
I'm the Canadian Ezra Pound. What do you like?
Yeah, well, I don't think I think you're the Coltrane in poems.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that.
And so maybe it's better that you didn't receive those horns because you put all of that soul into your work. And when I hear you, it's the rhythms, it's also the sound. When we were talking about the recordings of people like Ondaatje reading his own work, there are many recordings of you. Are there recordings that were specifically set out to be recordings?
There was one at the CBC that Phyllis Webb did.
Right.
Except it was me and 7 other people.
Right.
Yeah, it was. So there is an LP you can get of the 8 of us,
You might consider doing that in the next few years, like doing a whole, like recording of several of your books. I hear there's like a little bird came in and told me something about you wrote a Japanese opera?
Yeah, well, sort of. Yeah, an opera on a Japanese subject anyway.
Oh.
Well, it wasn't just me. It was me and my buddy Willie, whose name is William Walter Hamilton Thornton Trump. And his granddaughter has removed the Trump from her name. He's still alive, but he lives in Surrey. We were taking a course at UBC in Japanese history. And the guy that was giving the course was like, he was probably the number one person in Japan. Like he was a great surgeon. He was a very well-known poet. He could do anything. Like one time he took us over to the Japanese garden, cooked us a Japanese meal, and sang all the parts of a no drama. It was just unbelievable. Anyway, me and we got all excited and decided, because he and I have been writing songs together since we were in high school, right?
Right.
And so we wrote this opera. It takes place when the Americans, as they claim, opened up Japan to the West. So this was like around 1850, something like that. And they've just come into Tokyo. So the Tokugawa period is over and the Meiji period is beginning, or whatever the hell it was. And so we took various characters. We didn't write a script for the details of what happens, but we wrote a whole pile of the songs.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm just going to try to convince you that I never remembered any of them.
So, come on. Let's hear one.
Okay. Most people don't know what was going on in Japanese history 170 years ago. But a lot of them have heard the word shogun, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I'm chewing a candy and I'm...
Yes. Just take a moment and just...
That's in the plot.
Okay. It's a sound
I'm having
effect.
a candy and I feel dandy, right? And a little bit randy. How about you, Andy? No. Okay. All the characters come on and announce themselves. Even well, in a sense, there's one about when one-armed Tanaka played the maraca in Osaka. You ever heard the singular maraca before? No, ever?
No.
Okay. I'm the shogun with the slogan, I'm a real go-get-em guy. A kakemono is my kimono. Kakemono is that thing you see on the wall with writing on it. And it's usually like sayings, right? A kakemono is my kimono, or vice versa, that I swear faithfully by. Now my credo here in Edo is the byword you go by. It ain't surprising, our sun is rising way up there in the sky. Now you take my slogans verbatim, 'cause I'm the shogun, what done create 'em. I'm the shogun with the slogan, I'm a real go-get-em guy. Our sun is rising way up there in the sky. Come on, nobody has written a line better than that in Canadian poetry in the last few years.
Never.
No, but there's one of the verses is about no, I can't remember the word. Anyway, there was an introduction to that operetta. It starts off with a takeoff on Oklahoma.
It's really fun.
Yeah, well, it was very exciting, and
Are you going to publish it?
no,
No.
I haven't even written it down. I don't know. When I die, it's gone.
Oh,
Like a
not because we've got it on tape now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but you've only got like one of the songs. You haven't got I'm yo, dime yo, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And which has this wonderful lines. And when you raise a daughter like her mammy, she can come and straighten my tatami. It's got it, eh? Right? Have you ever heard a song with tatami rhymed with something? Boy.
So,
Okay.
question.
Okay, now let's get serious.
Question.
All right.
Why do you write?
Well, it's sort of like asking, oh, why do you breathe? As soon as I learned to read, which was before grade 1, because I was reading the newspaper during the Second World War, thinking I better get this over with because when the war ends, there won't be any more newspapers. That's what I thought. It was so sad that as soon as I said, I want to do this, right? I want to write a newspaper. And actually, what my ambition when I was a kid was to be a reporter. And when I was a teenager, I wrote to the sports editor of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I still have that letter, by the way. I'm a collector. And his letter back, I mean, and he took me seriously, and he told me about going. He said I should go to the University of Missouri because they had a really, really good newspaper writing program, right? So I could have gone there, but then I would have just been going back to the state that my mother's family came from, and so forth. But then I found out that writing poetry was. Well, I did become a journalist of time, from time to time I was a journalist. But I wrote because writing and reading are the same thing. And reading is what's the nicest, it's the second best pleasure you can have all by yourself.
Do you think that poets are the keepers of history?
Of history?
Yes.
No.
Oh.
I don't think so. And I don't think they're the unacknowledged legislators of the world either. But because I think history can be about poetry, and poetry can mention things that happen historically, but I don't think they're doing the same job. I mean, I've written historical novels, yet I don't think that what I'm writing is history. I think what I'm writing is novels. And I don't think poetry, no. I think poetry is not... this will get me into some of my hobby horses, but I don't think that poetry is about something. I don't think, like, what's the main subject in poetry? Love, right? Almost all poetry is about love. You could almost say it's all love poetry, where there can be different kinds of love, like holy love and love of a fellow man, and so love of the sweetheart that you love, etc. That it's not about love. Like a poem is not about love. Poem is love. Poetry is not in that sense about something. It is something, right? So that you can never. You know how? Okay. You know how when you're having a dream and you try to tell that dream and you can't, right? You say, no, that's not quite right. It's like what you're having in your mind right now is nothing like my dream, right? I just can't get it. Same thing's true of anything, not just dreams. The rest of your life, you cannot get what you see or what you see yourself doing or whatever in a poem. You can't do it because, just ask 12 people. Just read one of your poems to 12 people and then ask them, and they won't agree on what you just read to them, right? But you can write a poem and give it to somebody. It's a world. You can say, here, look at this. Or you say, it's not about love, it's an act of love. You know what I mean? It's like, it's hard to describe.
I think you described it well.
Yeah, but you don't know what I'm talking about because you're thinking about something. Every word I use, you have a different meaning for it, right? Isn't that awful? But it's not awful because say you have an audience of 12 people, you're creating 12 things for them, right?
Yes.
And all you had to do was make one. What? Who would not want to do that?
Maybe poetry is a placeholder for frequencies
Well,
in that case.
if you're talking about energy or
Yes.
yeah. The other word for that is meaning. Like, and meaning doesn't, like, they used to try to tell us when we were in high school, you got to get the meaning of this poem. And they meant, what's the person saying in other words? And I said, no, meaning doesn't mean what you're doing in other words. Meaning means as what you're talking about when you say, you mean everything to me, right?
Yes.
It's like a gift or something.
Yes.
And that's what meaning is in poetry, I think. I sound like an idiot.
Well, no, I think that I don't think there is meaning in poetry. I think that it can be
No, there's meaning. It just doesn't mean what people mean by
yes.
meaning. Yeah.
It's just not.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, because someone say, did that poem, you can't say what did that poem mean to you, but you can say, how much did that poem mean to you? And you can say, that poem meant a great deal to me. Right? And then if the person asks you, what did it mean to you? You say, I can't tell you. It's so important, I cannot tell you. It's like, it's like what was there in the universe before the Big Bang? Like, there had to be something, but we have to be satisfied with never knowing.
Yes.
Yeah. But the poet is always trying to do something that's impossible, but to do it as well as he can, I guess. Yeah. Or
Do you remember that first moment that you wrote something down and you went, I like this feeling and I think I'm going to do this more?
Yeah, that's when I was trying to get Wendy to keep on being my girlfriend. And that's when I first started not throwing out the things I wrote. I used to write and write and write up until I was about 21, about the same time that I used to pray to God. And when I was 21, I stopped praying to God and started saving the poems I wrote. And the first ones were to Wendy, to the late Wendy, yeah. And it was to try to save what I thought was going to be, the rest of my life. Yeah. So, but that was also about the time that I started reading. No, I started reading poetry seriously when I was in high school. I discovered H.D. and she's still my favorite poet. And when I was in the Air Force, which poor George had to spend on the prairies, it was my own fault. Well, I, right behind the photo section, because I was a photographer, and right behind the photo section was the base library and a place where you could go and take certain classes and things and stuff like that. And the officer, who was the librarian of the station, you could tell that's what he was because he had a messy uniform. He had somehow or another made sure that the library contained the poems of Kenneth Patchen and Kenneth Rexroth, whom I had never heard of, for good reason. And I started reading them and I thought, holy cow. And I don't know why I started telling you this, but reading became like probably the most important thing in my, well, it already was the most important thing in my life, but writing and reading are the same thing. Writing is just another word for another way of reading. Somebody once said, I forget who it was, one of my friends, asked him why he wrote poems, and he said, so I'd have something good to read.
Yes.
Which I'm not that stuck up.
Well, sometimes it's good to remember that when you're writing poems, that what would I want to read?
Yeah. Well, when you're writing poems, I like what Jack Spicer contended, that poetry. A lot of people think that, I remember when my kid was going to school and she was in grade 2 or 3 or something like that, and they took creative writing, and I said, "What?" I said, "What an idiotic idea." And I thought, why do you do that? And I said, and the teacher said, so she can express herself. And I said, that is exactly not what poetry does. You don't express your bloody self. Like Jack Spicer said, poetry comes from outside. That's why people make up ideas about like the muse or God or whatever. That poetry, like you're sitting there saying, I'm ready to receive, and you write it, right? And you don't know what you're writing when you write. If the poem's any good, you haven't got a clue what you're saying.
That's right.
Yeah. But later on you read it and you say, this is really good, and it's not really good because it says something momentous about history or politics or anything like that. It's because it's a very well crafted piece of work. I don't know. Anyway.
It is craft.
Yeah.
I agree with that, and whether it's developing your own craft and deciding like what a poem, that your poem looks like and feels like, but also is crafted like. And it takes years to get to that.
And you don't have to be a poet either, because I think one of the most important people in my life was Warren Tolman, who taught at UBC, and who the guys who said, get those Americans out of this country, they didn't like him at all. But he he is as important to poetry as any poet of his time was, because he could hear, and that's what they're doing. Like the poet's job is to hear, right? And that's what he was doing. He was hearing, and he knew. He just opened himself to what they were doing, what they were writing. It wasn't a case of, oh, I got to learn all these terms. But you know what he could do? The big anthology of poetry, from Beowulf to T.S. Eliot or whatever it was, the Norton anthology, he knew it off by heart. He knew all poetry off by heart. The lucky guy. God, I wish I could have done that, right? I've known a few people who do that. Dan McLeod, who started the underground newspaper here, he had that. He could memorize all poetry. And Warren, when at UBC, when you retire, you give a big long talk to the English department and the rest of the university if they want to come, or people from downtown. So I went to Warren's. It was wonderful. But at the end of his, he recited a 6 or 7 page poem by William Butler Yeats.
Oh.
And as he spoke, he said he's an American from the state of Washington. He had an Irish accent. By the time he was finished, he was reading it with an Irish accent. And he just recited the whole thing. Not a mistaken word in the whole thing. So what he's doing is proving that reading and writing are the same thing, I think.
Wow, beautiful.
My last book of poem was called Writing and Reading. Yeah. That was wonderful. And I've known a few other people that can do that, and I envy them so much. That's why I can do those 6 lines from Beowulf. I also can recite a very, very short poem by a 19th century Central American poet in Spanish, and maybe a few other things about that long, or a couple of lines, and that's all I can do. Even though I used to be on the stage, right? When I was a kid in high school, I was like the actor in my class. And I never knew my lines until opening night. And then I knew them. And it was a miracle. It was awful. I thought, I'm going to have to. And I didn't have the nerve, like the guy who was a year ahead of me in high school. He was that year's actor guy, right? He later on became a union organizer in Vancouver. But he once he'd lost a line, and he went over to the prompter and said, "What's my line?" In the middle of the production. It was wonderful. I didn't have that. I wouldn't have had the nerve to do that. I would have faked it.
You said you collect things. What do you collect?
Gene will tell you, I've got a scribbler in which I've written down the title, the author, and the publisher of everything I've read since I was 12.
Oh, you're kidding.
Oh, yeah. And a million things like that. Yeah, I've been a collector. Well, it's a collector and what did Jean say? She said, I'm an archivist. Yeah, she says I'm an archivist, and that's true. I've got a whole pile of things like that I've kept track of all my life.
Wow.
Yeah. I have a complete run of Alpha Flight comics, which is Marvel Comics' Canadian comic book. I used to have a complete collection of all sport and baseball magazines starting in 1948. Gene finally got me to get rid of them. I've got in there and over there, I've got about, 60 or 70 baseball caps from real teams, right?
What's your favorite baseball cap?
My favorite baseball cap. It depends. In terms of its own beauty, my favorite baseball team is the Dodgers.
Yes.
So in one sense, that would be my favorite cap. But my favorite cap in terms of the beauty of the cap alone, we flew down to Maui in order to see the first game ever played by Maui's new professional baseball team.
Oh.
And they hadn't played a game yet. We went up to their headquarters and we found this one guy there who was like, I don't know, equipment manager or something. He opened a box for us and we bought a couple of caps. And it's kind of 3D because it sticks out.
Do you have it?
It might be in there.
And you know why? I knew I was coming here, so I got a baseball cap.
Uh-oh.
And I'll put mine on too.
8.
8? That's
Yeah.
big, hey? Is that a big head?
Pretty big, yeah.
Big head.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
We'll have a reveal.
In terms of absolute beauty, that's...
And you know what? This is Haida.
Oh, wow, okay, yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That we both have. Do you want to put it on?
Yeah,
in Maui?
we both have, what do you call indigenous
hats.
Folks. Yeah. I don't know whether we have anything from, oh boy.
That looks good on
Yeah,
you.
that looks good on you.
Can you see us? Our eyeballs?
Well, this year, during this year, I can't remember which year it was, we went to 4 league openers. We went to the opener in Seattle, the opener in Kelowna, the opener in Maui, and the opener in Seattle. What is one other one? Oh, Vancouver. So we went to 4 opening
Wow.
games. Yeah, that was an event.
Wow.
And look at that. I have no idea what's on the front of that hat.
The hat that he's wearing is...
Is that a rose? No. Oh,
Yeah,
it's Oh, it's you told me, right? Yeah.
It's a Georgian bay.
It's a place in Ontario of all places. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
Ontario. It has a little tree.
pretty good.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, yeah.
I like the color.
But see, mine are all like.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
Get a
have-
close-up of that.
I don't have any fan hats. I just have,
Gorgeous hats.
yeah.
Look at that. The Hawaiian Islands. Do you have it?
And the Hawaiian flag, which has a Union Jack on it, as you see. I think. Yep.
Wow.
Because England used to have it until the Americans stole it.
No, that's the way of the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one more question.
Yes, I will.
Oh, this is I don't know. Well, I'm curious to know what you think. That where are, you talk about poems being reading and writing at the same time, and your love of reading weaves into the love of writing, and that's what writing is. What is going to happen in the future with books and sound and
Yeah, well, it's already happening, of course. Like getting a poetry book now, or publishing a poetry book, or that whole procedure is getting to be more like gem collecting or something like that, right? It used to be like, oh, we'll publish, 12 poets this year. Now it's like, we'll very carefully administer the publication of one book of poems. And so there's getting to be fewer and fewer publishers of poems, and fewer books of poems, and fewer times in which poetry is quoted. Like during the debate between the vice presidential candidates last night, nobody recited poems. That wouldn't have happened in earlier times. They would have been making quotations from stuff, right? Because nobody's reading it anymore, and so on. So that a book of poems will become instead, like mostly people their poems will be on the children's network, what are those things, like YouTube and stuff like that. But the book of poems will become like a collector's item. I think that's what's going to happen, and so that buying a new book of poems won't be that much different from making sure you go back and get the first edition of something, right? So that's what's going to happen. But I don't mind. I mean, I won't be here or anywhere.
well, you will be here.
Yeah,
You'll definitely be here.
In a sense, yeah. For other people, I'll be here. Yeah.
Yeah, you've left your mark, and so
Yeah.
you will always be here, like HD.
So a poet is a maker. That's what the word means. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about maker's mark, which I wouldn't mind having a glass of right now, except I can't drink anymore. That's so sad.
Can't do anything anymore.
I can't drink beer anymore. I can't walk. I can't
Smoke
play.
cigarettes.
I miss playing ball. Oh, I quit. I played ball until I was 65, and I can't do it anymore. Well, partly because I can't walk. But even when I could walk up until a couple of years ago, I couldn't play ball anymore. It was awful, terrible.
Well, the reason why you're doing so well now is because you played ball till you were 65.
Maybe, yeah. Well, my mom lived to be 100, but my dad only lived to be 67, so I'm sort of in between.
Your dad, the science teacher?
Yeah. But right now, I'm the oldest Bowering in our family. Like, there's a couple of cousins that are older than me, but they're not, their name was never Bowering, right? And so I'm the oldest Bowering there ever was. My grandfather died the night before his 85th birthday.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. He was born the 28th of January, or February, I mean. And my mother made it to 100. When she died the night that Trump won his first election. And somebody told me she was putting in her vote. She might as well have been an American. Her mother was an American. Her father was an American. But she was just a poor little hillbilly. And she had a teacher who turned out to be my dad.
Oh.
Yeah, so he taught her, I don't know what he was teaching in school at that time, and he taught her how to be a catcher in baseball. She was also the women's spike driving champion of Greenwood, BC for 2 years in a row.
Wow.
Yeah, they had to get a spike about 12 inches long, and they had to drive the spike with a hammer, and she won it 2 years in a row.
Wow.
And she said, "Now you behave. You've seen what I can do with a hammer."
You loved your mom.
Oh yeah, PB. She was my first. My late wife referred to her as PB, and everybody calls her PB now, and everybody called her PB the rest of her life, and that's who she. But her real name was Pearl. She comes from a hillbilly family, so she's got it. Her name was Pearl.
Hillbillies are great sometimes.
Yeah, she's from the Ozarks. Her dad was from the Ozarks.
Wow.
And her mother was a Mennonite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So remember Minnie Pearl?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She was wear the hat. She's the one that wore the hat with the price tag on it.
Yeah. I always loved the name Pearl after Minnie Pearl.
Yeah.
I liked Minnie Pearl.
Well, Pearl was the nickname for what's the name, that singer from Texas that died young. Used to sing me and Willie McGee. Janis Joplin.
Janis Joplin.
Yeah, her nickname was Pearl.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, one last question. Which poem of H.D.'s do you love so much? Is there one particular one?
Yeah, it's just called Trilogy. It's 3 volumes long. Yes. And we read it before it was published, and it was printed by the Bowering Press. Oh yeah, and is that Daniel Pinkwater?
This looks great too.
Yeah, I love Daniel Pinkwater.
Oh my gosh,
The
this looks
Hoboken
great.
Chicken Emergency. It's about this kid that gets adopted by a 266-pound chicken.
Oh, fantastic. Well,
Did you see the news last night about the goat that ran the half marathon?
Yes, and then won. I think the goat got the...
Well, they gave him a medal. It wasn't,
medal, yeah.
It was just for finishing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because after all, how many goats, right? So he's going to be entered in something else now. Apparently
he's really into marathon running.
Joshua is his name.
Next he's going to be doing triathlon.
Maybe, yeah. Goats can swim, I don't know.
The goats can swim. Goats can throw a dart or something.
A bike, I think.
A bike,
Bicycle,
throw a bike.
They have to ride a bike.
Buy a cigarette.
That might be a little more difficult, right? Yeah, riding a bike, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for today.
Thanks for having me.
And I will be coming by to read my book to you.
Ms. Wilson had me.
Later, agitator, in a while, bibliophile.